Thank you, Kenko, and thank you, Echo. Wonderful to be with you all tonight. The last time I was supposed to give a Dharma talk, about six to 8 weeks ago, I came down with COVID, and so I wasn't able to give the talk, and I was very sad to not be with everybody. And I've also have come up with a very intense schedule over the past few months, and it's been harder for me to join the groups. So it's great to be with you all tonight. So all of the talkers during this time period have been asked to talk about embodiment and how we embody our practice. And as I was just, because it's been so hard for me to join, I was just thinking as I was chanting the Gata on opening the sutra, how chanting is one of the ways that we embody our practice. It's a way that we go into our body and kind of get out of our head, get out of the headiness. So I miss chanting together, and I hope that sometime in the future, in our new space, we'll be able to all chant together again. And I think embodiment is something that we do every day. I was just thinking about something that I do when I go to work now. When I get off of the exit on 125th Street, there's a spot where you have to wait at a traffic light for a while. And I have a car now that has a sunroof, which is incredible. And I've noticed that when I'm stopped at that light, I can look up and there's all these trees hanging like right over my head. And they're so beautiful at this time of year with the leaves and the twigs. I use that moment every day when I drive up to take a breath and look up, say hello to the trees, and come back to this moment. But I wanted to talk about a kind of a deeper sense of embodiment that is going to kind of take the form of what is sometimes called a way-seeking mind talk. In many Zen centers, they give an opportunity for people who are not seniors to give a talk with they call a way-seeking mind talk. It's a way to tell your story of how you came into practice and what brought you to practice, and what practice is meant for you. So I thought that I'd tell a little bit of my story, and within that, see where the embodiment lies for me. And I can say that when I look back at all of this, I think the main embodiment of what practice has been for me has been healing, and healing wounds, healing emotional and psychological wounds. So before coming to practice, might say that I was at a very low point in my life. When I look back now and through all the practice that I've been involved in these past few decades, I could see that I was very dissociative. I was dissociating through most of my life. I was asleep. I couldn't even begin to question why I was asleep, because when you're asleep, you don't really realize that you're asleep. And as a result of this, it's very hard to take care of oneself because we're asleep to what's happening. And so when a serious personal conflict arose in my life at that time, I felt completely lost. I didn't know how to deal with it, and there was this rumbling. That's the best way I could describe it. That was going on inside of me that caused a great deal of psychological and emotional pain. but I had no idea what it was, and uh, and I had a very difficult time living with it. And so I think that I would say that this was the first step. The first step was being humbled and realizing that there was something off, that there was something wrong, um, and that I needed help. That I couldn't do it. I couldn't do this alone. So the first thing that I did was I found a therapist. I was lucky that there was at the time there was a center for performing, a medical center for performing artists that offered therapy, and I started there. And as fate would have it, my therapist, after just a few months, um, after hearing my interest in Zen, told me about the Village Zendo and that I should go hear this great teacher named Enkyo Sensei give a talk. So it just so happened that a friend of mine was also practicing at the Village Zendo at that time. So he brought me down to beginning instruction, which Shinryu was teaching at that time on Varick Street. And I did that, and then I went to the first Thursday that I could to hear a talk. And it just so happened that it was a Fusatsu Thursday. And so it wasn't just a talk. All of a sudden I was bowing and I was bowing. And the talk was on the precepts. And so my initial feeling from both of these first two visits that I was left with was that in this place, I felt that in that space, it was a place where I was not going to be able to hide anymore. And that when I was there, whether I liked it or not, I felt fully exposed. And around this time, I was really looking for some answers, looking for some guidance, and looking for some healing. I wasn't aware at the time that it was healing. I thought that I was broken and needed to be fixed. And so right around that time, I was with a friend who brought me to a Native American sweat lodge for New Year's Eve. And it was during that sweat lodge that there was a point when the shaman who was there told us that a spirit had come to visit us in this tent, and that the spirit would hear our prayers at that moment. And I prayed for help. I prayed for help, and that I wanted to be better, and I was asking for that. And the answer came to me through the shaman. He said, "You can have what you want. You know what you have to do." And at that moment, it just clicked to me. I have to go to the Zendo, and I have to have a committed practice of meditation. So so it began, and I started coming every week, sometimes twice a week, and it came around the time when I was asked if I wanted to sit Tangaryo and become a formal student, and of course I did. And two little experiences that I remember very succinctly from that Tangaryo. First was on the lunch break that we had. We had a little lunch break, and Miyoko Sensei was the monitor for this Tangaryo. On the lunch break, I was so shocked to see Miyoko Sensei eating a burger and drinking a Coke. I don't know why. I thought that if you were going to practice Zen, you had to eat vegan, super healthy food all the time. And so that was the first shock. And then the other thing that I remember very, very much is at the tea afterwards, when you sit Tangaryo, you have tea with the abbot afterwards. And I went out on a limb for myself, and that I wanted to say a joke and say something funny. And it was the first time that I ever noticed myself dissociate, because I said the joke, and I think I was fearful of what the response might be, or fearful of putting myself out on a limb like that. And it was as if I blacked out. It was almost like I was unconscious for a moment. And then when I came back to, I looked up and everybody was laughing. So it was just an interesting moment. And I noticed that, wow, I dissociate. But anyway, so I was in this practice, and there were some messages that were being repeated that I kept hearing around me that were leaving a great impression on me. And the more I heard these messages, it made me feel like I was in a place where I could feel safe, and I could feel safe to be who I really was. And the messages, well, let's think about it this way first. I came to practice for healing, but I didn't know it was healing. Or I thought that the healing meant that I needed to become enlightened, and that I would learn the ancient secrets and the ancient practices that would make me a better person, or make me a whole person and free me from my troubles. But then these messages that kept coming back to me at talks and readings, that all of our so-called troubles or shortcomings, emotional issues, all this stuff needs to be included. That was just kind of a shock at first. It was, what? All of my baggage is a part of Buddha nature. And the image that taught this lesson was the image of the lotus, the image of the beautiful treasure of a flower. If you've ever seen a lotus, it is, in person, it's incredible. It's remarkable. It's this huge, unbelievably beautiful flower. But in order for it to grow, in order for that to be, the roots have to go down into the swamp, into this murky, dirty, muddy water. And it's in that murky and muddiness that gives the nutrients that allow the lotus to blossom. And so this idea gave me a great sense of relief, and showed me a new path for healing. I'd been hiding and running from painful, dark, and murky truths of my life. And it was in facing them that I would find the answers, or the healing that I was desperate for. So this gave me the curiosity to start to witness what was actually happening inside of me. It offered a new lens in which I could look at my internal struggles, not as an embarrassing part of myself, but yet as the whole of me that was included in Buddha nature. It's part of the whole of me that was included in Buddha nature. So this brings me to when I went to my first retreat with the Village Zendo. And that retreat was the year that there was the great tsunamis that hit Asia. And if you remember that those tsunamis happened the day after Christmas. And the day after Christmas is when our retreat would always start. And so a lot of us who were traveling up, this was before cell phones, it was before smartphones, it was before we would get the breaking news on our banners. And so most of us didn't know what had happened. I remember on the way up, I think a few of us went to get a bite at a diner somewhere. We heard something about some tsunamis, but we didn't know the full story. And now Ryotan Roshi was coming up, and he came up a little bit later that year. And so he came up and gave a talk and kind of clued us into everything that was going on, which was shocking to say the least. And in his talk, he said something and made this and told this story that has stuck with me ever since. And he had read an article about someone, I can't remember where in Asia, but where the one of the tsunamis was, that saw the tide drastically recede. And this person knew that means that a tsunami is coming. They knew that. And they happened to have a moped, and they got on their moped and drove as fast as they could up to higher ground, and was able to get up there in time to be safe from the tsunami and watch it pass underneath. Now, what Rio said in that talk, which has stuck with me, is he said that he realized that most of us come into the practice thinking that Zen is going to be the moped that takes us away from the suffering, that takes us away from all the bad stuff, and we get to go on the top of the hill and look down at all the suffering that's happening below us. And of course, there was a great big laugh when that happened. And then the next thing he said was that what it actually is our job to walk directly into the tsunami. And that hit me like a tsunami when I heard that. And this cemented this idea that had been swirling around in me, that I've been hearing at the community even deeper. And it was that instead of looking for that moped, I should be looking for the tsunami. And so what does that mean? What is the tsunami of our lives? What is the tsunami of your life? Maybe you have a tsunami right now. What are the things in our lives that we usually run from? What are the things in our lives that present themselves that we look for that moped to get the hell out of here? And maybe if we look inside and start to pay attention, we might see these little tsunamis, these little storms that are developing. And that gave me the curiosity to start to turn towards it. Now, for me, whether I realize this or not, all of this would always begin in the body. And sessions and retreats were the laboratory for me to really follow these bodily leads. I really needed the space that session offered to allow me to sink into my body and really see what was there. I don't think that I could have done any of this without sessions. And from the teachings I had digested, I was slowly beginning to shine light on the uncomfortable places that arose, instead of running away, turning towards it, and beginning to trust that I didn't have to look for a way out, which I always had done before, but instead for a way in. And then what happened? So the first thing, wow, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of regret, there's a lot of guilt, a lot of embarrassment, on and on and on. It really blows my mind that there was a time when I would lie to myself, pretend that these things weren't there, that I would constantly find that moped to run away and get away from the realities of my life. So, zazen and sessions and the Zen practice really helped me to see the mud and accept it as my life. And this came from the trust that all things are Buddha nature, as are all aspects of my life. So why would I look away from them? A koan that describes this in a very pithy way, that was a very strong one for me. It goes like this. A monk asked young men, "How is it when the tree withers and the leaves fall?" Young men said, "Body exposed in the golden wind." Another thing I wanted to talk about just a little bit was receiving my Dharma name. Because there was stages, there was kind of stages that I went through up to today, I would even say, of what I went through after hearing the description of it. Those of you who don't know, my name means heroic virtue, which has always been kind of embarrassing a little bit. But when I first heard it at my Jukai, I have to say a wave went through me. And it really struck me as a relief. So almost with tears in my eyes, I was thinking, wow, I'm not a coward. I'm not a nobody. And so that was the first stage of this that really got me going along the way. And sure enough, after more and more retreats and more internal delving, the second stage came up, which was, whoa, this is not really who I've been in my life. I've not been this heroic, virtuous, heroic character gallivanting around with a great sword. I've actually lived my life, much of my life, in fear, cowering away from embarrassment and from shame. So the second stage was a kind of smack in the face of reality, of who I was. And then this, Mike's call this the third stage, came somewhat recently when I was questioning, what is courage? After 20 years of working on healing myself, when I turn around and see where I've come from, you know, that story of when you take a walk out in the fog and you can't see where you are, and you just kind of feel like you're wandering around aimlessly, and you don't even feel like you've gotten anywhere. And then when you walk back into home, you don't even realize how soaking wet your clothes are from being out in it all that time. So when I was able to turn around and see where I was coming from, that I stayed committed to a spiritual and meditative practice, that I was working hard to face my demons, that I was not accepting untruths in my endeavor to heal myself, that I was looking square at all of my wounds, what they were and where they came from. All of that takes courage. And it even feels weird for me to say that right now. But that's where my name has brought me to now, that the courage is not it's not as maybe I had seen it at first, but it's in the soft and slow and everyday work of continuing to face the reality of my life, of myself. So coming off this Thanksgiving and reflecting on gratitude, I can say that Zen practice and this community in particular have basically saved my life. They've helped me to see who I am and to bring it forward instead of constantly retreating and hiding from my true self in fear while sleeping through all of it. Now I can try to piece my life back together again and remember my life. A monk asked young men, how is it when the tree withers and the leaves fall? Yunmen said, body exposed in the golden wind. I think we're always exposed. It's just a question of whether we embody it or not. Sometimes there's anger, sometimes there's sadness, some really uncomfortable feelings, but they're all mine. And I'll leave you with a little passage from one of my favorite plays by Tennessee Williams called Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. And at the end of this play, this is a a little back and forth between a father and his son, and the father who has just found out that he has serious terminal cancer, doesn't have long to live, and is it going to, and because of where the cancer is, it's going to be very painful. And so Brick is Brick and Big Daddy. So Brick sees Big Daddy grimacing in pain, and he immediately walks over with some morphine to give him a shot of the morphine. And Brick says, "It'll kill the pain, that's all." And Big Daddy says, wincing in pain, "It'll kill the senses too. You got pain, at least you know you're alive." It's easing somewhat now. When you got pain, it's better to judge yourself. It's better to judge yourself of a lot of things. I'm not going to stupefy myself with that stuff. I want to think clear. I want to see everything, and I want to feel everything. Then I won't mind going. I've got a lot of guts. I've got the guts to die. What I want to know is, do you have the guts to live? Brick says, "I don't know." And Big Daddy says, "We can start by helping each other up the stairs." Thank you, Village Zendo, for helping me up the stairs all these years.